On June 30th, 1859, a man by the name of Charles Blondin was the first person ever to cross Niagara Falls on a tightrope. He walked all the way from one side to the other. This is a journey that started for him back when he was 4 years old. He saw a man walk on a tightrope and decided, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And apparently from 4 years old, he began practicing, he began working on it, and he began performing. And he began to go through. And so his journey to this moment started when he was 4 years old. Then in about 1855, he moved to America, where he traveled around doing tightrope and with an acrobatics team, and began making preparations to be the first person ever to walk across Niagara Falls. The rope he walked across was about 1,300 feet long and 2 inches thick. And they fastened it on both sides. Apparently on one side they tied it to a tree, and on the other side they tied it to a stake that they had driven into the side of the bank. And along about every 20 feet or so they tied guide ropes that were tied either to the bank or down below them to help keep the rope steady and keep it from sagging. However, there was a problem in the middle of this rope, about 50 feet worth of line. There were no guide ropes. They couldn't put any there. And so for about the middle 50-foot section of this tightrope, it would sag and it would sway right there in the middle. Well, Charles Blondin did eventually walk across the tightrope, not once, but apparently over the course of a couple months, walked across this tightrope some 300 times, going back and forth, and he would do different things each time to help keep his audience engaged. Later on, one of his audience members would say this, as they saw it get fastened to the rope, they would say, there were hundreds of people examining the rope, reported one witness, and with scarcely an exception, they all declared the inability of M. Blondin to perform the feat, the incapacity of the rope to sustain him, and that he deserved to be dashed to atoms for his desperate foolhardiness. Like I said, he kept his 25,000 people who watched him, who paid a nickel to come watch him, attuned to what was going on by doing different things. At one point, apparently, he walked backwards across. Another point, apparently, he walked blindfolded across. On his first trip or second trip, he apparently stopped in the middle and made an omelet and passed it to the boat beneath him. I would have liked to have seen that, how that all played out. But he did different things each time. We're not going to talk about all 300 trips back and forth across this rope, but there are two that are of particular interest. One time he went across pushing a wheelbarrow. And this may be a story you know. This is kind of a famous story now. He goes across, he pushes the wheelbarrow, he gets to the other side, and he asks, do you guys think I can do this again? And the crowd apparently goes nuts. They're cheering, they're hooping, they're hollering, yes, you can do it, we believe in you, we've seen you now cross this rope a bunch of times. And he says, great, I'm going to need somebody to get in the wheelbarrow. They said once he says that, the story says everybody grew silent. Nobody was cheering anymore. Nobody was hooping and hollering anymore. Apparently a few people walked forward in an effort to join him on this trip, and getting to the edge, they chickened out and went back to their spot. But he did finally find one person to do this with him. There's some discrepancy as to who exactly it was. The two prevailing theories, and the most prevailing theory, is it was his mother. His own mother would go across with him. Sat in the wheelbarrow and went across. The other theory was that it was his manager, somebody who went with him for years, had seen him cross thousands of feet of rope, decided to get in the wheelbarrow. Now, Blondin's story, this one in particular, has begun to be used a lot by pastors and preachers as an analogy to faith and what it looks like to trust and to believe. Everybody believed Blondin could cross the rope. They'd seen him do it. But nobody was brave enough or believed enough to put their hope and their life in his hands. They believed he could do it. They just didn't believe him quite enough to get in the wheelbarrow. And the funny thing is, the only people who eventually were willing to get in this wheelbarrow with him were people who knew him very well and people who'd known him for years and trusted that he knew what he was doing with this. And so what we see from Blondin's story is this idea of faith and trust and believing and commitment, right? This willingness to get in the wheelbarrow, because once you're in the wheelbarrow, all your will is gone. You can do nothing. You are stuck there. This wheelbarrow goes over, you're going over. And this was before the days of tying ropes around these guys or nets below them. He was up there by himself with nothing. If he fell, he fell. That was the end of it. Now, he didn't fall. He lived a long and happy life and apparently walked some hundreds of miles across tightropes before it was all said and done. During another one of Blondin's trips across the falls, he asked if anybody would be willing to get a piggyback ride across. He couldn't find anybody to get in the wheelbarrow, and so he really couldn't find anybody to get on his back. The only person who was willing to get on his back and ride across was his manager, and he began to walk across with his manager on his back. Apparently, every few feet, about 20, 30 feet, he would have to stop, and at one point even lay down on the line with his manager having to sit there and wait for him. And he walked across. Well, as they were going across, like I said, there was already a 50-foot section in the middle that did not have these guide ropes. It sagged and swayed, and as they were walking across, 2 other guide ropes snapped as they were moving. If you're a conspiracy theorist, there are some who believe the ropes were cut in an effort for some people on the bank to win a bet. But as they're walking across, these ropes snap, the things begin to shake, the rope begins to sag, and Blondin says this to his manager. Blondin gave his manager the following instructions. Look up, Harry. You are no longer Colcord. You are Blondin. Until I clear this place, be part of me, mind, body, and soul. If I sway, sway with me. Do not attempt to do any balancing yourself. If you do, we will both go to our death. When we put our trust in Christ, when we put on Christ, we are no longer our own. Our hopes, our desires, our pleasures, everything about us become Christ. As Blondin tells his manager, he says, you are no longer Harry, you are Blondin. Where I go, you go. If I sway, you sway. If I stop, you stop. You do not move. When we fully trust in Christ, we are putting all of our hope and desires and passions in Him.